So I've done that. In fact, I've also, in the low category, I guess you would call it, is more asynchronous. And I say low because for me personally, I like to get immediate feedback on what I've said, what I've done, questions I have, whether it's with colleagues, with students, with those in industry. And I think the students also prefer that given a choice. However, having said that, our world is now global and technology has taken away all these barriers. So the good news is we have the opportunity to network with, talk with those from all over the world, all walks of life. And sometimes asynchronous communication is better than no communication.
That's right.
And so for example, one of the very popular and very successful assignments that I've incorporated in my classes, even traditional courses, is what I call the online mentor assignment. And in this assignment, students are required to identify someone who possesses certain criteria. So for example, if this person is a mentor, they're not 21, they're not fresh out of their program, this person has 10 years of responsibility, not just for programs, but for people. They have budget responsibilities, things that make their lives as managers and leaders more challenging. And the student would connect with this person. Do they know them before? It doesn't matter. I encourage them not to know them before because it's not just mentoring, it's networking. And the student has to compose questions that are interesting to them that relate to the course. So for example, we talk a lot in some of the courses I teach about the concept of empowerment, which is managers sharing decision-making ability, etc., with their subordinates, which gives them more buy-in into what they're doing and voice. And a lot of students find the idea appealing when they're the empoweree. Yep. But when they're the empowerer, there's something kind of dicey about that. It's like, wait a second, I've moved up the corporate ladder to get this power and now you're telling me to give it away. Yeah, a lot of students have a lot of trouble with that, trust issues and fear, what if they mess up, etc. So I say, look, talk to the person that does it. I mean, I've been in industry, been there, done that, but I'm not there any longer, aside from consulting and occasional executive development. So the students have this conversation with a practicing manager and say, hey, what do you think about this empowerment stuff? Does it really work? What do you see as the pitfalls of it? Is it worth it in terms of the benefits? And the mentor, usually within a few days, will compose a response that only he or she could compose. It creates reality around a more sterile course concept. It provides more teachers, if you will, than just me, more validity because, hey, I think I've been there and done that, but I'm still a professor. I'm not the same as a practicing manager. And it gives the student also some confidence about not only that this concept is important and it's used in the real world, it gives them something to talk about, a talking point, whether in their written assignments or in the discussions in class. We talk about something and say, well, I don't have any personal experience empowering others, but my mentor said, it's kind of like, remember the old commercial, Charles Schwab is my broker, and he said. That's right. And so that, I think, again, for me, has been a fabulous, well, for the students, a fabulous way for them to put into context, put into practice, apply, and interact with colleagues, with those ahead of them in the business world, and even with students. This is a way for them to really make good use of the information and apply it, as opposed to, okay, well, we're going to have a quiz on chapter 6. The quiz is online. Go do it sometime between now and Friday. Right. I'm not a big quiz person.
Well, and in graduate school, we've moved beyond quizzes into the upper order thinking skills where, projects and portfolios are more important, more realistic assessment tools.
Well, I certainly have. I'm not sure if all of my colleagues have, but, And I don't just mean my colleagues here.
That's right.
They're still, and as I mentioned, I teach in various countries. We're ahead, I'd like to say, in the U.S. We're really quite ahead in terms of, I don't want to say catering, but that's the first word that comes to mind, catering to the adult learner and trying to...
Well, understanding the needs of the adult learner.
Okay, I like that.
Then in my last talk with one of your colleagues, Suzanne Hoff, we were talking about classroom management, and it's clear to me that you've put quite a bit of thought in developing these activities and your class Suzanne Hoff was telling me about in classroom management, planning is the key. What level of planning do you put into getting these classes together, and what lessons have you learned in preparing these classes?
Well, planning is critical. I mean, of course, just because you're online doesn't mean you can hide behind the computer. In fact, interestingly, I was reading an article very recently that said there's something called distance-induced courage, that people, whether in online relationships or other online media, suddenly they
That's
have
right.
this courage to say things they wouldn't say face to face. And as a professor, being credible and being effective in the classroom is important to me, and whether my classroom is face to face or online. So I'm not so courageous to think, oh, it's online, I'll just wing it.
Yeah.
I don't do that in face to face, and I certainly don't do that in this
Absolutely.
environment. And I think for me, the planning is really more around, how is this going to work logistically? Where can this break down? What if suddenly the email system or the internet is down, or someone's personal? So I mean, I don't want students. I want technology to be seen as a facilitating force and not a hindering force.
That's right.
And so that's one of the things I would say is important. For me also, I guess I don't know if I would call it preparation or just in general a lesson learned. The same idea applies in the initial conversations that I have with students, whether it's the start of the course or, more importantly, the start of a program that's either all online or what we call hybrid these days, kind of half and half. And I think it's incredibly important to manage student expectations. And by saying that, I actually mean on both ends. And so, for example, I have had conversations with students where I say, listen, just because this course is online doesn't mean it's a walk in the park. The same material, the same expectations, the same deliverables, more or less, certainly adapted to the medium,
Right.
are expected of you. Just because your presence is only online does not mean we're going to cut you slack and you're going to have half as much to do. So if you are a full-time working professional, you have a spouse, you have kids, maybe you even have aging parents that you're taking care of in a demanding job, don't look at this online program or this online course as, oh, this is a nifty way to fit this in. Because as people who, my students know me, I'm a very demanding professor.
Exactly.
And so to me, it's not a lot different, really.
In terms of making clear your expectations to students, what advice would you give to fellow faculty members about the expectations on faculty for participating in online classes?
Well, one thing I would say for sure is don't be surprised if you get emails 24/7. And I don't mean that you're going to be flooded with emails, but because the medium has changed, students have an expectation. Let me say it differently. If a student can go online at any hour of the day and pick up their assignment, so too is their feeling they should be able to reach you. So by managing expectations, and I mentioned a moment ago, it goes both ways. I let students know, look, I am on the computer a lot. Doesn't say much about my social life, but that's another story. And I generally do get back to students within hours. That's just who I am.
Right.
But you need to, as a faculty member, be clear with students that if, for example, I know some faculty will say, I have office hours Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 3 to 4, and there will be instant turnaround, phone calls, emails, text chats, whatever the case may be. All other times, you can expect a response within 24 hours, or whatever number you're comfortable with. If you don't say that, the students get upset. I sent you an email 3 hours ago, why haven't you responded?
Right.
So managing expectations is really important.